Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Turning Towards Life. This is Lizzie and Justin from Thirdspace, and we are live as we have been for 120 weeks already. I think this is our 121st here on Facebook on Sunday morning at just after 9 o'clock in the morning in London. And as many of you know, we will then be later on the Turning Towards Life podcast, which you can find on Spotify and Apple and Google, and these days on Alexa. You can say, Alexa, play the podcast Turning Towards Life, and we will magically appear. So you can find us in lots of places on YouTube as well, and on our Turning Towards Life website, where you will later on be able to read this wonderful piece, Lizzie, that you've written as our source for today. So thank you for that. So I just want to say hello to everyone who's with us again. Such a great joy that we get to do this. And say hello to you, Lizzie.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being with us. This is a special edition for me of Turning Towards Life because it's about the thing I'm in at the moment. And it's just occurring to me as well that it's going to be an amazing thing to have it documented how I'm doing at the moment with a 3-month-old little one and what kind of opportunities it's affording me in my growth and falling apart as I'm seeing it. So I'm grateful to be here and to be talking about it, and also grateful just for all the response as well from everybody who wrote underneath the post when I put it online on Friday as well. It's very beautiful to read all your kindness and warmth towards us. So thank you.
Before we read what you've written, Lizzie, I want to make a plug for the many of you who listen to us on a podcast who may not know that if you find our Facebook group, which you can just search for Turning Towards Life, as well as being able to watch us live if you wish, which works for some people and not for others, you get to do what you just said, Lizzie, which is to take part in the conversation around the sources that we either have written or have brought. And there was a really beautiful and set of responses to what you'd written with many voices in it. And I so appreciated the sense that for all of its gifts and for all of its ills, one of the things that Facebook does for us, this private group that we've created, is it creates a place where community can happen. And so if you do decide to come and join us there, you can be something, in addition to being a receiver of this conversation, you can also in a way be a participant in this conversation, and we would so welcome you there. So you can search for us and you just make a request to join, and we will happily welcome you. And the other thing I want to say is, for any of you who are in London or could be in London and are listening to this early in February 2020, in 6 days time from today, so on Saturday the 8th of February in London, in Hammersmith, we have an opportunity for you to come and be coached for the day by students on our professional coaching course. So it's something we do every year. People come for the day and get a chance to work with someone who is 3/4 of the way through learning to coach in a way that's really coherent with everything that we've been talking about, of course, for a couple of years here, Lizzie. And we have some places this coming Saturday. So if the time of listening is right and your location is right and you're free on Saturday, the 7th of February, you can head over to our website, the Thirdspace website, which is wearethirdSpace.org, and you can find all the details and sign up there. And we would love to meet you. It would be a wonderful opportunity to meet you in person. You'd be very welcome. It's completely free. The only thing that you need to do is commit to be there all day. It's from about 9:30 in the morning till about 4:30 in the afternoon. So you can find out that there, and that is announcements over, and the substance of what we have to do together here today, we can begin.
Great. So I'm just going to read this and then you can read it, Justin.
Yeah.
So this is called The Way I Love You. And this got written in amongst a pool of tears on the sofa, holding my baby girl as she was sleeping one day. And it goes like this. The way I love you. I wish that you know your beauty because of how I look at you. I wish for you to feel how you are loved because of how I hold you. I wish for you to sense how safe you are by how I cradle you to sleep. If I could return the gift to you that you bestow on me as you smile, I would be a happy mummy. Your whole face lights up and my body does the same. As you sleep peacefully, your trust smashes me to smithereens. Most nights as you drift off, I cry because of my aching heart and how I no longer know who I am, and I'm glad for it. Because of you, I am dissolved. Nothing makes much sense anymore. What is anything even for now you're here? Who am I supposed to be, and how do I live here now you are alive and breaking me open with each small change? When you bring to me the worst of you, I will try and find the best of me, even if it bends me out of shape and turns me into someone I don't recognize, even if it goes against all that's acceptable in our normal world.
So I'm going to read this too. And I know that you wrote this, Lizzie, for you and in your situation. So I'm going to read it for you. But I'm also going to read it for my three, who, of course, you know, Lizzie, but most people who are listening don't know. The oldest of whom, my oldest son, Noam, is far from us, having finished school and setting off on his own life, his own adventures around the world. So he's nearly 3,000 miles away and will be for a few months. So I'm reading it for him, and I'm also reading it for our younger two, who are not so young, nearly 17 and 13, but were once exactly the age that you're writing for. So I'm reading it for them, but I'm also going to read it, and maybe for all of you who are watching or listening, you could hear it this way. I'm going to read it for all of us. So whether we've been parents or not, we've all been on the other end of this. We've all been little ones. So I'm reading it for us as the little ones that we were and still are, and also for all the people who did their very best in whatever form to carry us and care for us along the way. And this is by Lizzie. The way I love you. I wish that you know your beauty because of how I look at you. I wish for you to feel how you are loved because of how I hold you. I wish for you to sense how safe you are by how I cradle you to sleep. If I could return the gift to you that you bestow on me as you smile, I would be a happy mummy. Your whole face lights up and my body does the same. As you sleep peacefully, your trust smashes me to smithereens. Most nights as you drift off, I cry because of my aching heart and how I no longer know who I am. And I'm glad for it. Because of you, I am dissolved. Nothing makes much sense anymore. What is anything? Even for now you're here. Who am I supposed to be, and how do I live here now you're alive and breaking me open with each small change? When you bring me the worst of you, I will try and find the best of me, even if it bends me out of shape and turns me into someone I don't recognize, even if it goes against all that's acceptable in our normal world.
It's really beautiful having you read it back, Justin, because it kind of puts me in the bed, rocking Vesper, and I can feel the feeling of it. And I think I wrote this just for me. I didn't write it for Turning Towards Life. I just wrote it. And I was thinking about whether to post it because it's a very, just for me thing in a way. But when I read it back, I realized that, one of the things that we talk about and feel so strongly about in our work is that all of these places in our lives where we get smashed to smithereens, as I've said, are opportunities. And there's definitely a way that we could all be flawed in a way that is really, I don't know how to describe this, but I could just be taken out by this in a really kind of isolating way. That could happen. But because of the way that we practice in our lives, it to do with learning and opening, I can see and feel this as an opening. So when something happens that's so dismantling, and we feel the dismantling of our normal structures, it can feel very disorienting and kind of like I don't know who I am anymore, and what the hell everything is for, and what I'm doing here, and what I should be dedicating my life to, and questioning everything, kind of feeling like the foundations are being smashed of who I take myself to be and what I take life to be. And I brought it because I decided that this is really all of us, all the time, with anything that happens. This happens to be Vesper, this happens to be me right now. But it happens also to be just what happens in our lives. And I think we've said so many times, life will have its way with us. Life will be our teacher, no matter what way. And we can relate to it as if we are being dragged through a hedge backwards. Or we can relate to it as, I'm being dragged through a hedge backwards, and what am I learning, and how can I grow? And what is this expanding me into in terms of human experience that I am born for as a human? And so I brought this because I think it can be a route into the conversation about what it is to be in an opening. And I feel so opened, so kind of brought to the point of questioning absolutely everything because of the power of this opening. And this could be if somebody died, this could be if somebody got born, this could be if my world broke down in some way, like a relationship ended, or I was experiencing life in a very different way for whatever circumstantial or internal reason that was coming about through my life experience. And I think reading this back, I can also see that it's like I'm writing about the opening, and one of the consequences is the last paragraph, which is that because of this opening, because of this depth of shattering, I'm willing to do things I would never have normally done, in a way. And I'm willing to stretch to things that feel impossible. Like I know that many times in my life when people bring the worst of themselves to me, it's really hard for me to be patient or to be tolerant or to be compassionate. When someone's really, really angry with me or really rageful with me and I feel completely triggered, this is, my relationship with Vespa is inspiring me to do better in terms of bringing the best of me, even when I want to bring the worst of me right back at you. And I think that's the impact of these things, is that it changes our capacity. It changes our willingness. There's some kind of willingness that's born out of the smithereens that comes from love. And even though it feels like everything's been broken and everything's been smashed, and I don't know which way is up anymore, I know I love. I know loving is happening. That's one thing I do know. But it doesn't mean I know like what I'm supposed to do with myself, or how to make a decision anymore, or why anything in my life is the way that it is. And so it's kind of confusion and love, smithereens and love, smashed apartness and love.
So beautiful hearing everything you have to say. And I too had and have this very strong sense that you said that you wrote this just for you, but very often it's what we write just for us turns out to be the most universal, because it's very particular to you, Lizzie and Vesper, and it's absolutely universal to find ourselves as humans smashed to smithereens by things. And for some of us, it's the arrival of a child. And for some of us, it's the beginning or the end of a relationship. And for some of us, it's walking outside and seeing the sun shining. And for some of us, it's the end of a job, or a change in our financial circumstances, or getting a job, or, we could keep on listing things. And of course, humans, there is a particular quality to a human coming into our lives, particularly a very vulnerable little one who calls on so much. But I'm very much appreciating the bigness of what you've written and its relevance for all of us, and how what you're writing about is what happens when we find ourselves where our sense of self, the familiar sense of self that we have, gets called into question. We find ourselves in a new relationship with something or someone or with ourselves, and we don't know ourselves in the way that we have done before. And Vesper, I know from hanging around her, is a very potent force for this. But being the parent of older people, a 19-year-old son can be the same. And being the child of parents, a father and a mother can be the same. As can be a friend or a lover or a husband or a wife or a partner or And one of the things that really been growing in me as you've been talking has been actually a memory of mine of early parenting, of sitting when Noam, who's our oldest, was newborn, probably around the age, actually a little bit younger than the age that you're writing about, Vesper. And it was New Year's Eve, and we were sitting in his room, and I was trying to rock him to sleep in a rocking chair, and all the fireworks were going off outside for New Year's Eve. And I remember this very, very strong feeling that I can only really put proper words to some years later, which was starting to recognize that I could either fight to have life the way it was, and I could try and be the way I was, which would ordinarily have been on New Year's Eve, having some friends around, going out, whatever it was. That was one way I could go, and that way would be really painful, because life was not showing up that way, and it would involve so much abandonment, self-abandonment, abandonment of him to do that. Or I could begin to learn, and I think it has been a really hard learning for me, I could begin to learn to let life change me, and to let who I am be changed by the circumstance I'm in, and not hold on so tight to I am this way and I have to be this way. And really holding on tight in that way has got me in a ton of trouble many, many times. And even as I'm talking about this, I'm feeling into I mean, there's like a million billion things to say, and I don't want to say them all in one go. But as you were talking just before, Lizzie, that just as you said it, I had the similar growing sense, and then you gave name to it, which was when we can respond to an opening like this, something that really stretches our sense of ourselves, or even puts us outside our ordinary familiar self, when we can find it within us to respond with love, that's where everything becomes possible. That it's in fear that we contract away from life. It's in the sense that I won't be able to cope with this, I won't know myself. And that when we can come at it with love, and also not just love for Vesper, but love for our broken selves that are being torn apart and turned inside out by the experience, when we can do that, a huge amount becomes possible. And it's the ordinary course of human life to be continually turned inside out. All of which leads me to the sense that in a way, our biggest practice is the practice of cultivating our capacity to love when we're afraid, or to love when we're confused, or to love when we frankly don't have a clue what's going on. And to bring love as an orientation both to ourselves, whatever we're making of ourselves, and to that which is around us, which is not the same as not feeling something. So it's definitely not the same as not feeling afraid. I remember I often feel very afraid. It's something at another level to this. It's like starting to see whether we can hold even our fear in a loving container. And then we don't have to, I'll say this whilst I remember it, your line near the end about when you bring your worst to me, I'll bring the best to you, even if it bends me completely out of shape. I think of all the occasions where with my children or people I love or colleagues or whatever, what I've brought when something really difficult happened was not something that bent me out of shape, but which when I did it, I thought, oh my goodness, I just snapped at you, or I cut you off, or I said something that my parents would have said that was right for them, but isn't my voice, or that's something that their parents would have said. The not letting myself be bent out of shape, paradoxically, has very often led to me behaving in ways that when I look at them, I think that's not what's calling for here.
Mm.
There's something really powerful in just the sort of paradox of these two together.
Yeah, I so appreciate that, Justin. And I'm really stirred by this thing you're bringing about what it means to respond to the circumstance rather than have things be the way that I am. Like being a parent and going with the flow versus being a parent and trying to turn the situation back into the situation I was in before. And I can see that all the ways that we try and have things just as I would like them, or just as society would have them in the norm, is like a grand torture compared to what actually is required and what actually happens when we're in these circumstances that are new and we don't know quite what to do with ourselves and we love so much. And in my experience at the moment, it's taking a lot of courage to go against the norm, because the norm is to turn whatever is going on back into what it was before. So how do I have a child and then be just like I was before, but with a child? Is the kind of cultural narrative that's out there, which is get back to normal, get them in a sleep routine, you do all the stuff that you're supposed to do, and you're like, none of that is happening. Can I have the courage just to accept what is happening rather than trying to turn myself back into or further into what my perception of what the world is expecting of me? And it takes a lot of courage to lie there for me at night, sometimes at 7 o'clock, and know that that's my new bedtime. And that I can hear all these voices saying, oh, you should be up having dinner with your husband, and you should be doing this and you should be doing that, and they should be in their own room, and there's so many things that for me, as you're saying, that represent this getting back to normal thing. When in fact, if I let myself feel like this piece of writing is showing, if I let myself feel the feelings of what's actually going on with my heart, my only option is to go with. But if I shut that down and push that out, which I'm not willing to do, then maybe I could get back to normal. But it seems to me that following my heart and following Vesper and letting her and having faith in her to lead us into new territory, and to let that be the territory that is mine now, and it changes every day, is an act of courage, because I'm not doing what all of the kind of super mainstream books are telling me or whatever. I'm just not. And it's quite something to fight against that in myself and just go, well, yes, there's that, and this is what I'm doing, and I'm fine with this, and I trust the circumstance in me to be inviting out of me a new way of being that does bend me out of shape, but I'm glad for it. And I want to be bent out of shape, because I'd rather that than be my stale old habitual self right now. Like, when I really think about it, there's a safety that comes with my old habitual self. But when I taste this new world and see how beautiful the surrender is, and the no man's land of not knowing what's happening next, and letting myself love there in spite of the fear, it's much more interesting. It's much more compelling. It's much less familiar, and somehow feels much less stable. But there's a different kind of stability, a different kind of ground in it, which is a moment to moment responsiveness that feels like I can trust something. And it feels way more trustworthy than my kind of brittle hanging on to what I think my life should look like.
You're saying so much that's so important, and the thing that's really touching me is my way of saying it is going to be to wonder whether there really is such a thing as a stable self that stays the same over time. And it's a very powerful narrative in our culture that there's a way I am, there's me, Justin, and I am this way, and then people love me or dislike me or whatever because of that way, and I love myself or dislike myself to the extent that I am that way or not that way, and that it's a fixed something. And I can hear in what you're saying the way that we do this to ourselves. So and the way that the culture does this so that of you that is wrestling with there's a right way to do this that's expected, or there's a familiar Lizzie way of doing this that you've done your life so far, and that you're meant to get back to it because that's the way that you are, is that part is to assume that there is a Lizzie way that is one thing. And we do this to ourselves at great cost, and perhaps probably more tragically, we do it to other people as well. We go, there's a Vesper way, and Vesper had better stay in line with that way, or there's a Justin way, and if I'm different, then somebody else around me ought to make the move of getting me back to the way I was, to the familiar way. And what I think this misses is it misses something that you're saying so clearly in your speaking and in your writing, which I think is a matter of faith rather than anything else, which is that we're not one way, which is that to be a human is to be an unfolding something. Mm-hmm. And that it's part of our responsibility, if we're going to take care of our own lives and the lives of others with love, is to be in receipt of the unfolding, to be in receipt of the changing, to be a welcome for the development that's happening, and to do our best not to be the ones who try to keep everything and everyone in a tight little familiar circle so that we can avoid. And then my bracket is, it never actually works. We don't avoid being afraid, or we don't avoid being hurt, or we don't avoid through all our efforts what we just hold very tight. And when we go that way with ourselves and with other people, what we're actually doing is trying to keep ourselves from something that we can't keep ourselves, trying to keep ourselves safe from something that we can't actually keep ourselves safe from. So it's a doomed endeavor. But I think more importantly, we're actually missing an opportunity for life in its surprising extraordinariness to flow through. Mm. And you've been talking about being changed by a birth, and I've been accompanying as best I can a very, very, very dear friend this week whose dad has just died. Mm. And I can see that it's the same thing, which is, can we be people who can be around her to allow her to be changed by this, so that she comes out at the other side of it, and we don't have to demand that she now be the familiar one that we knew. Yes. But she can be different because of it. And that's the heritage of all humans, but we forget it.
Yeah. So funny, Justin, I've been really reflecting on the nature of the kind of, I know from maybe a spiritual perspective, there's like this similarity between birth and death that people talk about. But I've been reflecting on the kind of pragmatic practicalness to do with the parallels in birth and death. And all the while I was pregnant, I had two very wonderful close friends whose dads were dying really close to when Vesper was being born. And they're the kind of friends who tell me the actual details of when someone dies, what actually happens. And of course, I've been, around my own deaths in our family, and there's a kind of groundedness as well that comes, the practicality of death and dying and birth and birthing, that feels so similar in so many ways. And maybe one day I'll try and find a way of writing about it. But it is, I love what you're saying. And it makes me feel like how much of our troubles are created by resisting the change that's being invited by the birth or by the death, whether metaphorically or actually physically in our bodies. And when we're in a fight with what's happening, how much we add this huge layer of suffering over the top of something that's already a real challenge to our personalities. And this kind of not letting death have its way with me and not letting birth have its way with me creates this tussle and this suffering that if we could learn to orient ourselves towards surrender and welcoming of experience, of our individual experience, I wonder how we'd be in these things, and how it would shift things so that we could actually feel what's being invited to be felt, rather than be afraid, as you're saying. Like, how can I not be so afraid of all of these things so that I can really experience what life is bringing forth for me and bringing out of me and inviting me into.
I know we're right up against the time that we have, but I think the thing that I'll say is that's striking me in your very beautiful words is it raises a question for me that maybe we can take up another time, which is to wonder about when we are trying really hard to not experience things, when we're trying really hard to keep ourselves the same, what it is that we think we're defending and what it is that we think we're defending against.
Yeah.
And that many of our ideas about what it is that we're protecting and what there is to protect against are partial and flawed and reactive, and we could really usefully and productively start to wonder about them, and see where we've kind of got ourselves out of step with life.
I would love to talk about that. It's already bubbling away in my imagination what we might say about that. Well, thank you, and thank you for this very safe. I know, Justin, we've had somebody talk to us and ask us about the kind of nature of the relationship that we have, that this is all possible, and that we're going to maybe see if we could speak about that. But I really feel like the reason I can bring this, and I know you're not the only one who's here, whoever's listening is also here, but the reason I can bring this is because I feel like you love me in this way, where whatever I would bring, you would be willing to be bent out of shape to entertain what it is that I bring. And however out of the realms of normal it might be. And so I feel like that's one quality of what is so beautiful about bringing these sources and doing these things, is that I know that whatever realm I access in myself to bring as a source or write something, that you will find a place in you. And I mean, this one is easy because I know the kind of person you are that opens in this way to the circumstances of your life. But I feel like I can bring anything because of the way that your openness and your inquiry and your undefendedness in the face of whatever we speak about here and whatever conversations we have in general as well, your undefendedness allows for so much to come. So I'm very grateful to feel that kind of safety to be in this conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Lizzie. And you know that it's the same is true for me. And I want to say thank you to my friend Hala who brought this. Please, could you talk about your relationship? Thank you, Hala, and we will do. But the thing that I want to say now by closing is, it's funny, you know, doing my guess is that you would have something similar to say about this, Lizzie, is that doing a live, completely unrehearsed, emergent podcast that many people listen to might seem like a high wire act, but it's only a high wire act when what we're trying to do is to have it go a particular way. It doesn't seem to me that to the extent that we're able to be together in a way that has faith in the emergence and unfolding of our conversation, it's not a high wire act. It's more like, I love that you use the word entertain. I'm going to have to wonder about entertain, because to entertain is to hold a possibility, but of course it's also to bring delight. Has these double meanings. But to be able to entertain a possibility and to trust that we'll be changed by it, and that this project will be changed by it as it unfolds, is part of the deal here. That's what we're practicing.
Yeah. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you,
Thank
Lizzie.
you, everybody, for being with us. We'll see you next week.
See you. Bye-bye.